The third category of application layer protocols are protocols that are used to facilitate the sharing of files between between a client and a server. The first protocol in that category is File Transfer Protocol, or FTP. FTP uses two different connections. One for control connection. So using this control connection, the client may actually initiate the communication of the server, start the authentication process. So on the client you can type the user ID and password, and then you get the initial access to the server or to transfer commands back and forth. The data connection is when you type a request, or when you try to fetch the content from the server or to push data to the server. For each file, the client will establish a separate connection called data connection, which gets established and remains active until you finish the download or the upload of this file, and then you can establish another connection if you want to fetch the content of another file. So there is a control connection which stays live all the time, and on this connection you can type commands, you can authenticate and so on. And there is a data connection which stays live only when you try to fetch or when you try to push data to the server. I think the control connection uses port 21, and the data connection uses port 20. The other protocol, which is called server message block. Server message block has initially been developed by IBM in the late 80s, and basically the SMB protocol is used between a client and a server to map a directory, a specific directory, or to map a specific resource on the server to be exactly like as if it's local on the client. So Windows or Microsoft has developed further this protocol, or SMP protocol, to facilitate the sharing of a particular directory on the server to be as if it's local on the client, and we use that to map a directory from the server to a specific client. Or you can map a printer from the server to the client, and this way you can exchange files and copy it using the Windows Explorer, or you can print using a printer which exists physically on the other machine, but you see it as if it's local to your machine. So you can use SMP messages to start, authenticate, and terminate any connection between the client and the server, control file and printer access, or to allow the application to send or receive messages between the client and the server to facilitate the communication. In section 3 of this chapter, there's nothing new in this section actually. It's just to remember how the application layer will exchange data over the network, over the Internet of Everything. So the message actually travels, as we have discussed before, it travels from the application layer to the transport layer and the Internet or the network layer through the concept of encapsulation, as we have talked about before, using TCP or UDP protocol, and using IP protocol in the network layer, and using the Ethernet or PPP in the network access layer, and so on. And then we use encapsulation and decapsulation, as we have talked about before. And there is the concept of addressing. Then on the receiver side, the way that we have to distinguish between the different applications is, as we said before, through the port number. So the port number will tell us that this is a HTTP application on the machine, or file transfer protocol, or electronic email, or something like this. So if the port is 80, then we know that it's HTTP. If the port is 20 or 21, this is FTP. If the port is 25 or 110, so we know that this is SMTP or POP3 protocol. So to summarize in this chapter, we talked about the application layer protocols. We talked about the basics of the application layer protocols. including peer-to-peer and client-server models. We talked about well-known application protocols, which we have divided into three sections: the common application protocols like HTTP and SMTP. We talked about protocols to provide IP addressing like DNS and DHCP, and we talked about protocols for facilitating the file sharing like FTP and server message block.